Welcome to this Whole Life Action Hour. I am Ocean Robbins, your host. So happy to be here today, where we're going to focus on cancer and cancer prevention with Dr. Amber Orman, a double board certified radiation oncologist and a lifestyle medicine specialist. Dr. Orman is the Chief Wellness Officer of AdventHealth Medical Group and co-founder of their HEAL, which stands for Healthy Eating and Active Lifestyle program. And we're going to talk about the power of diet and lifestyle to help us be healthy in every cell in our bodies and to prevent cancer. So first, a little bit of context. This is a project of Whole Life Club, Food Revolution Network's ongoing membership community. Some of the questions I'll be bringing to this interview come from our Whole Life Club members. Nothing you hear today is medical advice. We're offering coaching, our own best insights, but always consult with a qualified healthcare professional regarding your specific healthcare realities and needs. Now, Amber, I am just so grateful for your leadership and your brilliant work and for this time with you. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Ocean. It's such an honor to be here.
I want to start off by asking at a really high level, can you explain how do lifestyle and diet impact risk of cancer?
Well, in a big way, to just tie a bow on it. And once we dig in, we really are talking about all chronic disease. And so cancer is our number 2 cause of death in this country, right below heart disease. And so it's a very important thing. And I'm so glad that we are discussing it today. And when we talk about cancer and all the other chronic diseases, we're really talking about the body experiencing inflammation and immune system suppression to the point that our body was able to, allow some cancer cells to grow into what we diagnose as some sort of, mass or, blood test discrepancy, some way that we detect it. And so I always think of it very simply as, the way that we live, the way that we eat, the movement that we get, the way that our body composition is, our relationship with any substances like tobacco and alcohol, our relationship with other humans, our sleep, our stress, all of these things affect our immune system and the level of inflammation in our body. And so we can, increase or decrease our risk of being diagnosed with a cancer via the way that we live.
A lot of people think of cancer as being largely genetic, and folks will be like, oh, my mom died of breast cancer, so I'm more worried about it, and how much is it genetic versus nurture? Like families' patterns often include lifestyle habits and also even environmental exposures. So if you were to break down like genetics, lifestyle, and environmental factors, what's the ratio? Obviously, not all cancers are the same, but kind of at a meta level, are genetics the main thing? Are they a significant thing?
So the answer, I think, is it depends. And so if we take all of our chronic diseases together again, we'll often see the figure that 80% of it is lifestyle and 20% of it is other stuff. But if we hone in on, let's say, breast cancer, which is my specialty within, oncology, only 5 to 10% of our breast cancers are actually genetic. And even within those patients that have a genetic mutation, even if we're talking about the BRCA gene, which is, the one that we hear about more often, those people can control the expression of those breast cancer genes through their lifestyle. And so cancers certainly run in families, but habits and ways of doing things and places of living and all of these things also run in families. And so we can see these clustering of diagnoses, but often we find that there is no genetic component that we're able to find with genetic testing. And that could be because it's due to a gene that we haven't discovered yet. We're constantly discovering new genes, and you can even have your genetic results kind of amended later on. But the expression of a gene that you might have is so controllable with the way you live. And we can turn on genes and turn off genes with things like our food and our movement and our sleep and our stress. And so I always share the example of, I've had multiple patients throughout my career, women that are in their 70s and even 80s with a BRCA mutation that would have classically resulted in a breast cancer diagnosis much earlier, maybe in your 20s or 30s. They didn't have anything happen in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, sometimes 70s. And then we'll find this genetic mutation and say, gosh, you've got the gene. You were supposed to have had breast cancer long ago. And then I'll ask them, tell me about your life.
Mm-hmm.
What did you eat? Where did you live? What was your stress like? How did you live? And always it's, well, we had a garden, lots of exercise, pretty low stress life, just happy, very strong faith, these types of things you'll find in these people. And they probably kept that gene turned off until very late in life, when just the natural aging process, allowed it to be expressed.
Yeah. If you were, for some bizarre reason, to want to design a diet that would maximize the odds of getting cancer, what would you eat and how would it create those effects?
Well, I would first focus on class 1 carcinogens, being processed meats. Okay, so this is our bacon, sausage, deli meats, hams, salamis, all the salty, cured, preserved meats. We know that those directly cause colon cancer. And then I would move to class 2 carcinogens, which is red meat. Okay, and then beyond that, it gets a little murkier. And, those are the other animal products, the chickens, the dairies, fish. Where are they coming from? It's a lot more gray once we move beyond class 1 and class 2 carcinogens. But what we do know is, in general, a very heavily animal processed food based diet with the addition of, potentially alcohol and sugar sweetened beverages, those are the cancer causing substances. And so when you look on any major set of guidelines in terms of preventing cancer in the first place or preventing cancer recurrence, we'll always see the red meats and the processed meats, alcohol and sugar sweetened drinks listed as kind of the worst offenders.
And conversely, if you wanted to design a diet to mitigate cancer risk, what are some of the cornerstones of such a diet?
Beautiful legumes and whole grains and all varieties of starchy and non-starchy vegetables, and our fruits and our nuts and seeds, what we traditionally would call our whole food plant-based diet, with minimal to no processed foods, and certainly minimizing animal products. And this is what you again see in the guidelines, when we look at any, whether it's American Cancer Society or AICR, American Institute for Cancer Research, they all say the same thing, to minimize these big 4 offenders and to maximize the variety of plants in your diet.
Tell us about antioxidants. Why are they so good for us?
So cellular damage happens through a lot of different pathways, but oxidative damage damages DNA. And when we have DNA that's damaged and not repaired, that's one of the precursors to developing a cancerous cell that could, morph into something that can grow uncontrollably. And that is what cancer is. The cells kind of lost all of the traditional stop points that would have kept them from becoming this out of control growth. And that is via DNA damage. So those antioxidants are meant to go in there and to help minimize all of this oxidative damage that can happen via anything, our food, our stress, the environment, all of these different things. We're constantly under assault in this regard. And so your best source of antioxidants is your plants, not your supplements, but those plants that you're eating in their natural form.
Thank you. Hippocrates is often quoted over 2,500 years ago to have said all disease begins in the gut. Would that include cancer as well? Does the gut health impact cancer risk? And if so, tell us about that.
Yes. And I think this is a field, we're talking about the microbiome when we're talking about the gut. And we're just learning so much so quickly about the microbiome. And I think we're really, coming to understand that this is the place where disease originates. And so it's so fascinating that, Hippocrates, is quoted to have said this so long ago. And here we are now, in 2024, thinking about the role of the microbiome and inflammation and immune system and how does this drive disease. And so it gets us back to just that, the body is inflamed, the immune system is distracted, and our cancer surveillance mechanisms aren't able to do what they need to do. And so much of that is driven by the health of the gut microbiome, which is driven by what you eat and your activity and your stress and your sleep. We're learning that all of these lifestyle factors, that we speak about in lifestyle medicine can alter the gut microbiome, what populations of microbes are in there, the metabolites that are produced, the effects on the immune system in the brain and inflammation in your skin. And it's just fascinating. So I think it's really cool that he said that so long ago, and now we're really learning the mechanism.
Yes. Thank you. It's so fascinating. I agree. And, I've recently been thinking a little bit about what a shift in consciousness it is to think that we're not just eating for one, but eating for trillions, and literally imagining all these little critters in my gut that are like excited when I eat, for example, fiber, and are kind of like annoyed if I eat something that doesn't have much fiber, and
Right.
may actually starve to death if we don't feed them well. Okay, and so let's talk a bit about fiber. How does fiber interact with cancer risk?
So I explain this to my patients kind of in the language we were just speaking with. So the gut bugs in the gut, our microbiome, they need fiber and they need a wide variety of it. And fiber only comes in the form of plants, and I always speak about, a steak isn't tough because it's full of fiber. It's connective tissue that you're chewing through. And so just remember, fiber is only found in plants, and we need a lot of different types of plants to support a very diverse gut microbiome. And we do know that the more diverse our microbiome, the lower our level of inflammation and the better the function of the immune system. And so if we can keep our bodies running very efficiently and very healthfully on a wide variety of fiber, then we can potentially avoid cancer for the duration of our lives.
Well, that sounds like a good thing. I think we all want that. And are there particular kinds of fiber that are optimal, or do you really just kind of want all of it?
I don't think that we know, we can't drill down and say, okay, you need this much soluble and this much insoluble. And I don't think we know the answer to that.
Yeah.
I think just in general right now, what we know is variety is key because we want a variety of microbes. And so we eat different beans and whole grains and vegetables and fruits. My patients will, when I say plant-based diet, they often think, okay, I want all the fruits and veggies, but I have to remind them that the beans and the grains have so much valuable fiber. Let's not forget about the importance of those as well, and also the nuts and seeds. And so I think right now, all we can say is just within a given week, 30 different plants. So we do know that much, at least from the American Gut Microbiome Project, that if we have 30 different types of plants throughout our week, which is so attainable. I mean, I attain that by breakfast, by lunch, probably on day one of that week. And you probably do too. I mean, people that kind of live like this, we are packing our bodies with plants every day, and you just naturally gravitate towards a lot of variety because you feel good when you eat that way, and so I always make that a goal for my patients. Let's think about every single plant that was in your oatmeal, and then your salad, and your rice bowl that had the beans and the veggies, and let's count how many herbs. And it's very easy to get to 30 in a given week. And then you get the benefit of a plant-based diet. And let's say you don't want to give up your fish entirely. Well, you can have your fish once, maybe twice a week, and still get all the benefit of that plant-based diet if you're getting to that kind of magic number of 30 in a week.
Yeah. Awesome. And of course, when we say 30, we don't just mean 30 different types of leafy greens. You mean all plant foods. So you are including legumes, you are including spices, you are including whole grains, fruits too, right? Those are all considered plant foods. Yeah, beautiful. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about any recent studies that have linked food choices with cancer prevention. Are there any things that have happened recently, even in the last decade or two, that you think are worth talking about? Like, what was the research and what was learned?
Yes. And I would say in general, studying nutrition is difficult because it's hard to control. We have to eat multiple times a day. And the chances of, getting a group of humans and kind of locking them up and controlling what they eat are not high.
Yeah.
People don't want to agree to do that. It's difficult to do. We have lives, we have jobs, we have families, we just can't do that very easily. So nutrition,
and very hard to control for placebo.
Yes.
One person's eating the kale, one person's eating the fake kale,
Right. It's just, it's a messy field. But when we look at the totality of the evidence, which I think is what we have to do, if we get kind of down a rabbit hole in nutrition, wondering if things like celery juicing are going to prevent my cancer, we're not going to find the answer to that most likely. But if we look at things like dietary patterns and risk of cancer, cancer for the first time, we have a wide body of evidence that says you can reduce your risk of getting a first cancer diagnosis anywhere from 30 to 50% just with the food. And so that's kind of our baseline. And then what's less studied is what happens if you are diagnosed with a cancer and you become plant-based. And so there's a couple new, and I've got them here just so that I don't misspeak. A couple of studies that came out recently. The first one is a review, came out in 2022, and they looked at plant-based diets and cancer recurrence, And their premise was, plant-based diets are recommended for cancer prevention in terms of not getting cancer in the first place, but the role in survival is uncertain. And what they found when they looked at all of the studies at that time that had been examining plant-based diets after the diagnosis of cancer, they found a significant benefit in prognosis, meaning the number of years you live with cancer, and your risk of recurrence, specifically in colorectal, breast, and prostate cancer. And these are the three cancers where we really see a lot of good data in terms of the benefit of nutrition. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Those are also our most common cancers too. Okay. So we have to keep that in mind. We're going to find more data where things are more common. And then, of course, they qualify it and say we need more research.
Researchers always do.
Yeah.
I've noticed.
Need more. Now, the other one I'd love to call your attention to, so that came out in 2024, this next one, and they were looking at the effect of diet on breast cancer recurrence in the Diana-5 randomized trial, okay? And so these were all breast cancer patients. They were stage 1 to 3, and they had surgery, may or may not have had chemo in the last 5 years. Some of them would have had radiation, but they were all considered at an increased risk of recurrence because their estrogen receptor was negative, or they had high plasma insulin, so evidence of insulin resistance, or they had metabolic syndrome, which is when you have insulin resistance and some high blood pressure and some weight gain and some high cholesterol kind of all together, and we call this metabolic syndrome. Mm-hmm. And so they divided these patients into two groups. Half of them just got the guidelines that say eat a plant predominant diet. The other half had a beautiful program of kitchen courses and community meals and physical activity recommendations. So much more extensive, advice. And they found that the women who made the most improvements in their diet were 41% less likely to have breast cancer recurrence than those who made the least improvements. And so here again, this kind of 30 to 50% reduction in your risk of recurrence is coming out. And we have other studies showing that as well, that we can reduce your risk of recurrence with plant-based diet alone, somewhere in the 30 to 50% range. And so it's so powerful.
There are a lot of anecdotal stories of people who have gone on a raw foods diet after a cancer diagnosis, and then, felt that it saved their lives. And there's a lot of thoughts about how saturating your body with an enormous amount of those sulforaphane and all the antioxidants that are available in raw foods could be beneficial. But I'm not really sure how the research backs that up. Do you think that especially if somebody has cancer, like a high raw foods diet is helpful? Do you think there's any difference between a lot of raw foods and 100% live foods, as they might use the term? Or do you think that actually gets to be problematic because it can be difficult to design an entirely raw food diet that meets all your nutrient needs?
Yeah, it's a great question, and a very complex question, because we have so many different types of cancer. Every patient has a different situation in terms of where is their cancer? How advanced is it? Have they had any traditional treatments? How did they respond? How long have they been plant-based? What's the status of their immune system? Do they have other chronic disease? And are they exercising? What's their stress like? What are all these other factors like? And so we can quickly see how drilling down on the effect of a raw food diet may be impossible. But I would just say in general that, I have had multiple patients come to me in different scenarios. Maybe they've been receiving treatment and decided it was not going well, and they wanted to try a food-based approach again instead. Maybe they're still receiving their treatment and they want to pair it with, a certain sort of diet. Or maybe they're in surveillance and they're just really wanting to optimize the chance of this coming back. And I think, the answer to your question is very specific to the individual situation. And that's why this is always a very individualized conversation with the patient. And I'm always here to support people when they've decided I want to approach this with lifestyle alone. But we always have a frank conversation that if we're in the situation where a cancer is in our body, it has evaded our immune system did not take care of it, and it's grown into a measurable tumor, that is a situation where we may very well need the help of a surgery and or chemo and or radiation. But let's never forget the benefit of pairing that with a super clean lifestyle with, a lot of raw foods and some cooked things. You can't eat everything raw. You can actually, because I've done that before, but it's not convenient. It can be, as you kind of referenced, very stressful to be on a raw foods diet because it's very prep heavy. Okay. And so I think we have to help people and guide them through that discussion. But the goal being, we assess the individual situation. If we're pairing it with traditional treatments, great. What works for you in your life? Do you have the capacity to prep all this food? Or do we need to make some rice and bean bowls and then do lots of, nice raw salads and some smoothies to pair with it? What's feasible? And there's a sweet spot for everybody, but just data wise, we don't have anything to say 80% raw is the sweet spot, and I honestly doubt that we ever will. That's a very drilled down question. And if we did get that answer, it'd probably be in a very small population, a very controlled study. And then people would, as we see all the time, say, well, sample size wasn't big enough, so it doesn't mean anything.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Gotcha. Thank you. What are some of the most common misconceptions about cancer and diet that you see a lot of people having?
all kinds of things. There is some confusion about ketogenic diet and plant-based diet, which we did have a great review paper come out a year or two ago that concluded that yes, while the ketogenic diet can do things like lower your insulin levels and lower your glucose and slightly lower inflammation in the short term, that in the long term, the plant-based diet is the better way to go, to prevent cancer recurrence. And so I do have that discussion sometimes because people will come very understandably confused about which way do I go? Because if you spend a second on social media or doing a quick search, you'll find it's very confusing. Another area that causes a lot of confusion is soy in breast cancer patients. And so, we had the results of the Women's Health Initiative trial that kind of clouded this issue in cancer patients. And we extrapolated from that soy products, because they're called phytoestrogens, were also bad because hormone replacement therapy, had a bit of a detrimental effect in a subset. And so this became an area of confusion, and I still hear this every day. But the data shows that soy is actually beneficial in breast cancer patients. And so I'll have my breast cancer patients consuming organic soy, a couple of servings a day. And it's also preventative for prostate cancer. And so, those are some areas where we do see quite a bit of confusion. I would say a couple of other things that come up are the neutropenic diet. So people getting chemotherapy will often be told no raw fruits or vegetables, no raw foods. Well, it's actually not true for the vast majority of people. Now, if you're a transplant patient and you have no immune system because it's been suppressed in preparation for transplant, that's a different scenario. But if you're just kind of a quote unquote normal chemotherapy patient getting chemotherapy, you can have your raw fruits and vegetables. You just wash them. And so there were actually some new guidelines that came out, and they said, stop recommending the neutropenic diet to chemo patients. And I was so happy to see that. And I'd say the last thing that also came out of these recent guidelines from ASCO was have your cancer patients exercising. Because for a long time, we're telling our cancer patients, just relax and rest and don't push yourself. And
Yeah.
of course, there is a point. Don't push yourself past a point. But we don't want you to lose all of your cardiorespiratory fitness when you're going through chemotherapy and other cancer treatments. And so continuing to maintain a level of physical activity is so beneficial during that time. So I'd say those are the big areas where we kind of hear conflicting things.
Yes. Thanks for shedding some light there. Now, I want to talk a little bit about some of the top foods for fighting cancer or preventing cancer. I'd love to hear your thoughts on mushrooms, on green tea, on cruciferous vegetables, and any other sort of stars, if you will, of the anti-cancer cuisine.
Yes, you're hitting on the big ones. So all of your cruciferous vegetables and your dark leafy greens are amazing. And you mentioned sulforaphane earlier. That's what you get in your broccoli when you cut it up and kind of let it sit a little bit before you eat it or prepare it. It's a beautiful food. Or you can do broccoli sprouts, and that's how I usually try to have my patients consuming, because you'll get more sulforaphane in the broccoli sprouts, and they're easy and fun to sprout. Mushrooms are incredibly important, and it doesn't have to be the fancy mushrooms. It can just be the white button mushrooms, but they have some kind of specific data in breast cancer, actually, is the data I'm familiar with. Your berries, any berry, okay? Apples with the peel on, green tea with lemon, all of your beans, okay, legumes and beans, soy. Those are the ones that I kind of make sure my patients are aware of that we need to be consuming on the regular. I also encourage oats every day with our tablespoon of ground flax in them, and maybe some chia and some hemp as well. And so making sure we're getting in those whole food based omega-3s. But those are kind of the big categories where we have, smaller studies, more niche studies looking at one food, but we did see, good results when we tried to kind of isolate a food.
Got it. Thank you. I'm curious about your own learnings from the Healthy Eating and Active Lifestyle, or HEAL program at AdventHealth. Could you tell us about what you've been up to and if you've learned anything interesting?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. HEAL is one of the things that I am most passionate about. And this is something that even before I joined AdventHealth, I was kind of ready to launch. I worked at Moffitt Cancer Center before I joined here, and I was working with my patients one-on-one on lifestyle. And it just became obvious that this was not a sustainable model. And we were also losing the benefit of a community. And so for those two reasons, we started this program so that we could provide that community and accountability and, the social support that's so important, while also being able to educate people and to guide people. And the program has changed quite a bit. It's 4.5 years now we've had the program. And so we've gotten rid of topics and brought in new topics. Right now, we talk about plant-based nutrition, of course, physical activity with a focus on strength training. Okay, a lot of people know what cardiovascular is, but they need more guidance in the strength training. We have a wonderful yoga session. We have a session on mindfulness. We talk about grief. This is a more recent session, and we brought this in because it's such an under-addressed area. You go through breast cancer treatment and you do all the things, you have all the appointments and check the boxes, and you could have come out the other end of this with your head spinning, but everybody's looking at you going, "You're fine, right? It's over. We're good now." And there's a lot of grief associated with the diagnosis and the changes in life and the changes in relationships and the changes in intimacy and the changes in the way that you interact with everything in the world. And so we brought this session in to really break that down and to help people kind of put a label to the things that they were feeling so that they could start to understand what it was and work not through it, but learn to accept and work with these new ways of interacting. So that's been just an amazing piece. We also talk about acupuncture because there's a lot of benefits in cancer patients. And then we have a whole session dedicated to the side effects of cancer treatments that are often not addressed. Things that people are kind of suffering in silence with. And that has been a really transformative session. And we have seen over the years, I mean, we've had over 300 people come through, and Ocean, I can't tell you how amazing these people are. And they graduate through the program, and then they graduate into our alumni group. We meet every month with this huge group of amazing people who just love each other, and they've made huge changes in their lives. You know, many of them are much healthier than they were before the cancer diagnosis. And so it's turned into this beautiful way of kind of harnessing the suffering and the grief and transforming it into something that is beautiful and enhancing and has just actually made their life better in so many ways. And it's like the greatest honor. I look forward to meeting with these patients every week.
That's so beautiful and moving. And I'm thinking of the saying that a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. You know, some things are too painful to not like make something out of them, right?
Right.
Some people say, oh, I'm grateful for my cancer. Well, good for you if you're grateful for your cancer. That might be going a little far for a lot of us, but can we make something worthwhile out of the suffering, out of the pain, and maybe find something more of who we are in the process? And then it seems like what you're doing isn't just like preventing death. You're actually nurturing life. And a lot of folks may have more love, even more joy than they did before this experience, as well as more health. And that to me is really, really worth celebrating.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have a few questions from our members I'd love to bring in here. Chris said, my husband has been diagnosed with an aggressive prostate cancer. We follow a mostly plant-based diet, but since this diagnosis, have been sticking to it with much more vigor. We were told that plant-based was only good for prevention, not as part of a cure. Our thoughts are that if the immune system is better supported with plant-based eating, then surely this helps as part of a cure, or at the very least helping stop further spread. Do you agree that it would be beneficial, or are we wasting our efforts? Also, what foods would you be upping to assist with the slowdown of a tumor? We've been adding things like turmeric and black pepper. Are there other things you would specifically add, or is it really similar to the preventative approach?
Well, definitely not a waste of time to pursue a plant-based diet after a cancer diagnosis. And I hope that we've convinced you of that with our discussion thus far. And so, but this is such an important question. So I thank them for sending this in. It is recommended by all of the cancer survivorship guidelines to basically do the same thing to prevent cancer in the first place, or to prevent a recurrence, or to, kind of act as something to support your treatments. And you're completely right in your thinking that the plant-based diet will support the immune system to better fight the cancer and to better recover from the treatments. This kind of old way of thinking of, well, I don't feel good, I'm getting chemo, I might as well eat ice cream and mashed potatoes and noodles and just kind of do what feels good right now. Well, you're further doing damage to your body while you're receiving a chemotherapy, which of course is damaging your body, because it is toxic. So our cells, our good cells, have to try to repair from that while we're trying to damage the cancer cells. And what you eat is so important. And so during therapies, I personally think that is such a critical time. And the data is so limited in this area because it's difficult to study. But continue doing what you're doing, heavy plant-based diet. Make sure you're also including your organic soy foods. Your turmeric with black pepper is beautiful. Just variety. And don't forget about your beans and your whole grains.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Mary said, when nauseous from traditional cancer treatments for long periods of time, what are the best foods to eat that are easy to digest? Any thoughts for Mary?
That's a good question. And it's probably individual to each person, because what might make me nauseous may not make, Mary nauseous, and vice versa. But some things that seem to kind of generally help, I'll have patients buy just fresh ginger root and make ginger tea. So you just kind of roughly chop it up and simmer it on your stove, for quite a while. And then you can put a little, if you want a little bit of manuka honey, just to kind of help with the flavor, or maybe a little bit of stevia in that, or dilute it with some ice, that can help with nausea. There's some acupressure points on your hand. Okay. And you want to look this up online, because I don't want to tell you the wrong point, but somewhere near the base of your thumb, that can help you with nausea. Okay. Peppermint oil. I usually have my patients put it on the wrists and kind of just deeply inhale. You can put it on your temples. Sometimes that really works well for people. And then you move on to what foods. Generally, smoothies seem to go down better, for most people. And so when people really don't feel like eating, we'll have them doing nice smoothies with berries and banana, or maybe, nuts and banana for something a little more creamy, and add a plant-based protein powder if you're really not getting much in, if you're in that point where just nothing wants to settle. Then your blender becomes your friend, and usually those fruit-based things are better when we're experiencing nausea. But again, it's kind of different for everybody. If you find that the sweet fruit-based smoothies aren't working, then think about, can I make a sweet potato soup in my blender? Can I make a butternut squash soup? Can I just sneak a few beans in there and puree it all? And does that taste good? But those are some things that might help.
Great, thank you. Pam said, are there any plant-based foods to avoid while taking a hormone-blocking medication as part of a breast cancer prevention plan, post-surgery and radiation? And what might be the best plant-based foods to eat while on this type of medication?
So, in general, there's nothing you need to eliminate from your life. Okay. Now, that being said, if you go crazy on the grapefruit, okay, the grapefruit affects the enzyme in your liver that processes some of these hormone blocking medications. Okay. So you wouldn't want to eat a lot of grapefruit or grapefruit juice. Now, that is kind of something that you'll hear about a lot of medications. So that's not specific, to these hormone blocking pills at all. Sometimes you'll read conflicting evidence about soy. Okay. Now, unless you're somehow eating enough soy to kick that medication off of the estrogen receptor, which I don't think is humanly possible, okay, don't worry about it. So eat your 1 to 2 servings of organic soy a day, but don't eat 54 cups of edamame in a day, okay? Cruciferous veggies, sometimes you'll read about that, okay? Those can influence your estrogen metabolism, but again, it's only if you're eating them in massive excess. So a couple servings of broccoli or cauliflower, Brussels sprouts a day in normal human intake does not matter. Now, one thing that really does matter is alcohol, okay? alcohol causes cancer, period. So we have to kind of level set there. And it does have a role in breast cancer, and there is no safe amount. But alcohol influences the way that estrogen is metabolized in your body. Okay. And it can actually increase estrogen levels in your body, and that can counteract these hormone blocking medications. So that's one thing that I am, clear on and share with my patients is we need to really avoid alcohol. And if we're drinking it, then it needs to be a very rare occasion, just the special occasion, and 1 to 2 drinks, and then we're done. Okay. The other thing to keep in mind is that when we're on a hormone blocking medication, depending on which one it is, sometimes those work on an enzyme that is in fat cells in the body called aromatase. Okay. And so we're on aromatase inhibitors. So what we don't want is to create more fat cells that make more estrogen. Okay. And this is why we see an increased risk in postmenopausal women who have a higher body mass index, is because they have a higher number of fat cells making estrogen. So after our ovaries stop making estrogen, guess what? We still make it, and it's in those fat cells. So we want to keep our body composition to the point where we don't have a lot of excess fat cells, but we stay more muscular. And so we bring that strength training in. Okay. And then the same thing, kind of fried foods, sugary foods, that goes along with the weight gain. Those are more dopamine producing, addictive type foods. And so we would want to avoid those just due to the weight gain principle.
Got it. Thank you so much. Okay, just as we're closing here, if you were to get on your soapbox for a moment and tell people who are worried about cancer what you want them to know about what they can do and why doing it is worth the effort, what would you say?
I would say that the way you live matters. Do not let a cancer diagnosis or even fear of cancer take away from the importance of what we do every day in our life. We do have a good amount of control. Even if you have been diagnosed with a cancer and you're in cancer treatment, this is a time to say, I'm going to take back control. I'm going to control what goes into my body. I'm going to control my physical activity. I'm going to control not my stress, because nobody can do that, but I will do my best to control the way that I respond to stress. I will bring in a mindfulness exercise. Examine the people in your life that you're spending your time around. Are those people that really enrich your life and that you feel good around, or not? How are you sleeping? Are you protecting your sleep? Are we making sure that it's prioritized? And are we avoiding things like alcohol and tobacco? And I think cancer is a time when it's a massive rearrangement of your life that you never asked for and you never planned for.
Yeah.
And if we can, in the face of all of that suffering and all of that grief, keep our purpose, our inner guiding light in mind with every decision that we make, it makes these things so much easier. So if you say, for example, I'll give you me, for example, my purpose in this life is service to others. Every decision that I make, down to the littlest thing, is made with that as a guiding principle. That is what I put everything in perspective to. And so if I say, gosh, those French fries really look good, I think I'm just going to go ahead and eat them. Am I going to feel great after? And am I going to be at my best to serve others after I do that? And so cancer is a great opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to bring this in. Every decision that I make is going to be, kind of oriented towards this one thing. And then it makes these things that can seem like extra work so much easier. And you can get into a flow and a rhythm with life and feel more connected to yourself and to others and to something much greater than any of us. And I think that that is what any suffering can provide to us if we're open to it and we receive it in that way. And I think it makes things so much more approachable, and we can actually come out the other end thriving, believe it or not. And so that is what I wish for each of you and for all of my patients. And I just want to thank you, Ocean, for the opportunity to come and share this with your audience.
Amber, it's been such a pleasure to have this conversation with you, and I am so grateful for the work that you are doing and for your willingness to share so much of your wisdom with all of us and for your partnership in the food revolution. We've been talking today with Dr. Amber Orman, a double board certified radiation oncologist and a lifestyle medicine specialist. She is the first ever chief wellness officer at AdventHealth Medical Group, and she's the co-founder of HEAL, Healthy Eating and Active Lifestyle, which is an 8-week lifestyle medicine program at AdventHealth in Orlando, Florida. Amber, we are so grateful for your work and thankful for this time with you.
Thank you.
When it comes to cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, heart disease, and other chronic illness, what really matters isn't how many books you read, how many webinars you attend, or how much you know. What really matters at the end of the day is what you eat and how you live. The science has given us what we need to know. Now it's time for action. It's time to implement and optimize your healthy lifestyle. It's time to get results. It's time to say goodbye to confusion and hello to clarity. It's time to say goodbye to bad habits and hello to good ones. It's time to fall in love with foods that love you back. It's time to join a community that will support you in achieving your goals. It's time for Whole Life Club.